You've been lied to about the Middle Ages, because behind the mud, behind the grime, behind every textbook stereotype of dirty, unwashed peasants, there was a hidden layer of high-tech medieval cleanliness. And the shocking truth is this: medieval people may have stayed cleaner than many of us do today, not because they bathed more, but because of what they wore. And that secret was linen. Part 1. The filthy Middle Ages myth and the white secret beneath it. When most people picture the Middle Ages, they imagine a world that smells like a barnyard, peasants never bathing, bodies caked in dirt, wrapped in coarse wool under the sweltering sun. It's the classic image we've inherited, and for centuries we've repeated it as unquestioned fact. But what if that entire idea is wrong? Because beneath those heavy wool tunics, medieval people wore something we almost never see in paintings, something that completely changes the story. They wore white linen directly against the skin, a fabric so effective, so brilliantly suited for hygiene that modern textile science has only recently caught up to why it worked so well. Medieval people didn't know about bacteria. They had no germ theory, but they did have experience, and they had linen. Today we treat linen like a luxury reserved for beach vacations and wealthy tourists. Yet for a 14th century farmer, linen was not luxury at all. It was survival technology. It absorbed sweat, managed moisture, and could be scrubbed, beaten, and even boiled without falling apart. It acted like a kind of medieval dry cleaning system, long before anyone knew what dry cleaning was. In a world where hot baths were sometimes feared, believed to open the pores and invite disease, even plague linen became the everyday solution. A freshly washed linen shirt wasn't just clothing. It was a protective layer, both physically and spiritually. It was a barrier against filth, a symbol of purity, and a tool every medieval household relied on. And that raises a simple question for us today. When was the last time you put on a piece of clothing and immediately felt cleaner? Part 2. The science behind the miracle straw. To truly understand why linen worked so astonishingly well for medieval people, we need to step into a world they never had access to. A world of microscopes, material science, and modern laboratory testing. Because only now, centuries later, can we finally explain the intuition they lived by every day. If you place a strand of linen under a microscope, something remarkable appears. Unlike cotton, which is dense and solid, linen fibers are hollow. Inside each strand is a tiny chamber, an elongated tube shaped almost like a miniature polygonal straw. And that hollow structure is the key to linen's hidden superpowers. First, it gives linen an extraordinary command over moisture. A piece of pure linen can absorb up to 20% of its own weight in water before it even begins to feel damp. To put that into perspective, polyester, the fabric we proudly call high-tech, absorbs less than 1%. This is why, after just 20 minutes of exercise, your gym shirt smells like a locker room, while a medieval farmer could work a 12-hour harvest in a linen undershirt and still smell almost neutral. Linen wasn't just fabric, it was medieval moisture management. Second, linen carries natural antibacterial properties. Modern lab tests have shown that linen fibers can suppress bacterial growth, especially Staphylococcus aureus, the same dangerous strain that causes many skin infections. In controlled studies, linen reduced bacterial colonies by up to 55%. Medieval physicians had no idea what Staphylococcus was. They had no germ theory, no microscopes, no Petri dishes. But they had experience. They noticed that wounds wrapped in linen stayed clean, while wounds wrapped in wool often turned septic. They were observing, without knowing it, the effects of lignin and phenolic acids, antimicrobial compounds built directly into the plant itself. And third, linen acts as a natural cooling and ventilation system. Because the fibers are stiff and do not cling to the body, linen creates a tiny micro-layer of air between the cloth and the skin. That invisible cushion keeps air flowing, keeps sweat from sticking, and helps the body maintain a stable temperature even in exhausting heat. It is clothing that breathes in a way modern synthetics still struggle to replicate. When you combine all these properties, the hollow fiber, the antibacterial chemistry, the constant airflow, it becomes clear why linen remained the first layer of medieval life for more than 1,000 years. They didn't need scientific explanations. Their daily experience told them everything they needed to know. Linen kept them dry, safe, and remarkably comfortable in a world without deodorant, detergent, or dermatology. And here's the irony. They understood the results, long before we understood the reasons. Part 3. The cold weather mistake we keep making. This may sound impossible, even absurd at first, but medieval people didn't just rely on linen to stay cool in the summer. They used it to stay warm in the depths of winter. And here's the twist. They understood a principle of cold weather survival that many modern hikers, campers, and even mountaineers have forgotten. Because today, when the temperature drops, we instinctively reach for synthetic base layers, heat-tech shirts, or thick wool worn directly against the skin. We trust technology, we trust marketing, we trust whatever promises warmth on the label. But medieval soldiers, men who marched through sleet, mud, freezing rain, and the kind of bone-deep cold that kills the unprepared, knew a truth far more fundamental. The secret wasn't just wool, it was linen and wool together. Imagine working in bitter cold. No matter how low the temperature falls, your body still sweats, especially if you're moving, chopping wood, marching, or fighting. And here is where the danger creeps in. If you press wool directly against your skin, it absorbs moisture slowly and releases it even more slowly. That means the moment you stop moving, you're wrapped in a damp, chilled layer that sucks the heat straight out of your body. Survival research is clear on this point. Wet fabric conducts heat away from the body up to 25 times faster than dry fabric. 25 times. A mistake like that can turn a cold day into a hypothermic emergency. But medieval soldiers didn't make that mistake. They solved it centuries ago by putting linen directly next to the skin and wool on top. Linen drank in the sweat instantly, pulling moisture away before it could linger. It kept the skin dry, the body stable, the heat sealed in. And the wool layered above didn't cling, it insulated, trapping warm air while linen managed the moisture underneath. It was a system. A simple, elegant, reliable system that let them survive conditions many modern hikers in synthetic gear would lose to. Picture a night on the winter march. Picture a foot soldier in a frozen forest, breathing clouds into the air. Beneath the armor, beneath the mail, beneath the tunic, is linen. Soft, breathable, endlessly washable. And on top of that, wool thick, insulating, but never touching the skin directly. That combination kept them alive. It was the difference between warmth and danger, between endurance and collapse, between surviving the cold and surrendering to it. And the truly astonishing part, this medieval layering hack is still one of the most effective methods known to survival experts today, yet most people have no idea it ever existed. Part 4. The Great Forgetting and the Age of Plastic. If linen was such a miraculous fabric, so durable, so clean, so perfectly engineered by nature itself, then why did we abandon it? Why did a material that carried humanity through 30,000 years of civilization fade into the background of our wardrobes and vanish from our daily lives? The answer lies in two turning points, two dates that quietly reshaped the way we dress and reshaped the world. The first was 1793. In that year, Eli Whitney patented the cotton gin. Overnight, cotton became cheap, astonishingly cheap, and infinitely faster to process than flax. Linen, with all its labor, all its handwork, all its stubborn fibers that demanded patience, simply couldn't compete. and by 1850, cotton had overtaken linen almost everywhere. The old ways faded, not because they stopped working, but because something cheaper came along. Then came the second turning point, the 1960s, the age of synthetics, polyester, nylon, acrylic. Fibers born not from fields, but from oil. Materials that could be churned out by machines, colored instantly, stretched endlessly, and sold for pennies. They were light, they were convenient, they were easy. Today, nearly 68% of all clothing contains plastic. But every convenience hides a cost, and this one is deeper than we ever imagined. Because each time we wash a synthetic shirt, it releases up to 700,000 microplastic fibers into the water. Invisible threads slip into rivers, into oceans, into soil, and eventually into us. Those fibers have now been found in human blood, in our lungs, even in the placentas of unborn children. Unlike linen, whose natural antibacterial compounds soothe the skin and help wounds heal, synthetic fibers can inflame the body. When inhaled, they can lodge deep in the lungs, provoking chronic inflammation, one of the silent drivers of heart disease and asthma. So here we are. We traded a fabric that kept generations clean, warm and healthy for one that is slowly contaminating the very systems that keep us alive. A fabric that once protected humanity, replaced by one now flowing through our veins. And it forces us to ask a painful question. Was the trade worth it? Did we gain anything meaningful, or did we simply forget the wisdom that carried our ancestors through the harshest winters and the harshest centuries? Sometimes progress isn't progress at all. Sometimes it's just forgetting. Part 5. The Linen Revival. How to bring it back into your life today. Here's the good news. The wisdom of the past was never truly lost. It has simply been waiting for a moment, for a generation, for someone curious enough to rediscover it. And the most inspiring part? You don't need a medieval workshop, a loom, or a fortune to bring linen's power back into your everyday life. You just need a few small, intentional choices. Let's begin with the simplest step. Start with whatever touches your skin. Linen works its quiet magic in direct contact with the body. A linen undershirt or a pair of linen undergarments may cost more up front than a pack of cotton t-shirts, but they last 10 to 15 years. And unlike synthetics, which break down, smell, and pill over time, linen only gets softer, smoother, and more comfortable the more you wash it. It ages like a good tool, more reliable with every season. From there, think about your sleep. We spend a third of our lives in bed, wrapped in fabric that either helps our bodies rest or traps heat and sweat until we wake up exhausted. Studies now show that pure linen bedding maintains a stable microclimate throughout the night. It helps regulate temperature, prevents excessive sweating, and supports deeper, more restorative sleep than cotton or polyester ever could. In a world filled with sleep problems, this ancient fabric offers a surprisingly modern solution. And finally, remember the one rule that matters most. The 100% rule. When you shop for linen, check the label carefully. Blends labeled as linen mix or linen blend often lose the antibacterial and moisture-wicking properties that make real linen so extraordinary. Pure linen, ideally from regions like Belgium, France, or Lithuania, where centuries of traditional craftsmanship still guide the process, gives you the full benefit of the material. This is where the magic is. This is where the history lives. And when your linen wrinkles, let it. In the Middle Ages, wrinkles were not imperfections. They were the mark of natural structure, the sign of a fabric untouched by synthetic coatings or artificial smoothness. Wearing wrinkled linen is an act of quiet rebellion against fast fashion, a reminder that clothing doesn't have to be disposable or flawless to be beautiful. It can be real. It can be lived in. It can last. Because reviving linen isn't just about clothing, It's about reconnecting with a way of thinking, a way that valued durability over novelty, craftsmanship over convenience, and long-term well-being over short-term trends. The revolution begins not in the world around us, but in the small choices we make on our own skin. Conclusion: wisdom is an investment. In the end, medieval farmers did not care about softness. They did not care about trend or style, or the promises printed on a modern clothing tag. They cared about survival. They needed a fabric that kept them warm in the cold, cool in the heat, clean in the dirt, and healthy in a world without medicine. And so they chose linen once, and well, because it worked, because it lasted, because it was, quite simply, the smartest investment they could make. Today, we live in an age of astonishing technology, surrounded by possibilities that medieval people could never have imagined. Yet somehow, despite all our progress, we find ourselves wrestling with allergies, skin irritation, disrupted sleep, and an environment choked by microplastics. Our bodies now face threats that their linen-covered world never had to endure. Perhaps it's time to shift our perspective. Perhaps history is not a relic of backwardness, but a library of survival strategies waiting to be rediscovered. When we look at linen through medieval eyes, we see not a luxury, but a tool, one crafted by nature, perfected through generations, and capable of improving our lives even now. And when we recognize that, we reclaim something deeper than a fabric. We reclaim agency. We reclaim wisdom. We reclaim the ancient truth that some choices, made slowly and made well, can serve us for decades. So Historia Prime asks you, sincerely and simply, are you ready to trade the convenience of plastic for the wisdom woven into flax? Are you ready to choose a material that doesn't just cover your body, but honors it? The alternatives still exist. The fabric is still here. And in the end, the choice, like the wisdom of the past, is yours.